Welcome to the College of Brockport, International Studies, School of Business Administration and Economics, Brockport Student Government, International Business Club debate on the Human Development Index, or HDI. I'm Erica Cooper, and I am President of the International Business Club here at Brockport. We are proud to sponsor this debate because the College of Brockport is becoming well regarded for its commitment to student engagement. And we are also proud to sponsor this debate because it's fun to debate these topics in the safe confines of the Academy. The International Business Club meets regularly every week to discuss issues pertaining to the world economy, and we welcome you to join us. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Dan Petree, the founding dean of the College at Brockport School of Business Administration and Economics, and today's debate moderator.
Thank you, Eric. The United States and all nations are undergoing a transformation in light of globalization. People want to know where are we headed? Reasonable question. Formulating a response to this question requires knowing who we are and if we are on a trend or not. And the way we measure ourselves reveals our values, we believe. The United Nations Human Development Index, or HDI, is one way in which national development is measured and nations are ranked. The HDI is a comparative measure of life expectancy, literacy, education, and standards of living for countries worldwide. It is used to distinguish whether a country is a developed, a developing, or an underdeveloped nation. It can be used to measure the impact of economic policies on quality of life. Today's debate topic is the United Nations Human Development Index, or the HDI, is a good way to measure a nation's development. Today's debate is modeled after a debate series titled Intelligence Squared, which can be heard occasionally on National Public Radio. And now Erica will describe the format of today's debate.
Thank you, Dean Petree. The format is as follows. We will vote to gauge the audience's opinion before the debate. Each team has 5 minutes for an opening statement. The moderator can ask each team questions about their position for 6 minutes per team in an open exchange. Each team can ask the other team questions about their position for 6 minutes per team in an open exchange. Each team has a 2-minute closing statement. Then the audience will vote again, and the team that persuaded the most people that they are right will be declared the winner.
And now allow me to introduce our participants. I'm going to ask each of the participants who may not be members of the combatants, but have been members of the team, to also stand so that we can capture your face on video. On the for side, we have Stephanie Palmer. Stephanie is a senior in international business who wants to pursue a master's or a career in social media marketing. Hi, Stephanie. Michael Bodie is a freshman chemistry major from New York City. Where are you, Michael? Michael, would you stand up so they can catch up? There you go.
How's it going?
Thank you, Michael. Kristen Casper. Kristen is a junior in political science who plans on attending law school. And Nicholas Shivka. Nicholas is a senior in international business, and he's interested in the nonprofit sector. Nicholas?
All right.
The against team for our proposition today consists of Curtis Vergara, a junior major in international relations. Curtis? Caitlin Rich, international relations. Where are you, Caitlin? There she is.
Hi.
Do it again. I don't think she got you. There you go. Thank you. Katie Beverland, a sophomore studying international studies and political science. Hi, Katie. Christopher Lotowski, a history major and a proud father. Christopher. Tyler Allport, international business. Tyler. Justin DeValder, international business. Is Justin here? Don't see him? Okay. Allison Keel. Allison is a freshman double majoring in political science and communications. And Aisha Kadir, a sophomore in international studies. Why don't we greet all of our panelists and their teammates? Now it's time to vote. Each of you, as you came in, was given a clicker, which you can use to choose your response to the following statement, which is of course the subject of today's debate. The Human Development Index is a good way to measure a nation's development. Dr. Z, do you want to explain how this works?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. So I recognize some people who did not get a clicker yet. Could you pass that down to her? And one back to Mike back there, the red shirt. Anyone else not have a clicker? Oh. There you go. Okay, the way this works, so please don't press any votes yet. There's the on-off switch is at the very bottom, so please turn your unit on. And then if you want to vote for the affirmative team, vote A. If you want to vote for the opposing team, the refuting team, vote B. And so please vote now on whether you think the Human Development Index is a good way to measure a nation's development. And I'll write down the results. All right, please vote now.
Oh, so that didn't vote again.
I didn't have it on properly. I'm learning as I go here. Here we go. Now we're voting. So I won't tell you yet what the results are. Has everybody voted? Okay, thank you very much. And now, please take it away.
And now let us begin our debate. We'll start with an opening statement from the affirmative team, and remember, the opening statements are limited to 5 minutes.
First of all, our team would like to thank everyone for attending here, and especially thanks to everyone who helped out, Dr. Michael Zilkowski, Dr. John Kachiga, Dr. Dan Petree, and especially the International Business Club for making this happen. So to start, according to the New York Times, only one measure has succeeded in challenging the hegemony of growth-centric thinking. This measure is known as the Human Development Index. With its introduction 21 years ago, countries have finally been able to measure national development on a new level that is constantly improving. Based on country-level combining indicators of life expectancy, educational attainment, and income, rather than solely gross domestic product and economic measures, the Human Development Index has undoubtedly benefited the world. In the Human Development Index's efforts to shift attention away from an overly large focus on economic growth, one of its main purposes is to play an advocacy role, which seeks to reestablish a balance in priorities to counteract a focus distorted by an economic growth-centric approach. According to the United Nations Development Program, at all levels of development, the 3 essential are for people to lead a long and healthy life, to acquire knowledge, and to have access to the resources needed for a decent standard of living. If these essential choices are not available, many other opportunities for development remain inaccessible. Based on this statement, we can infer that without diverse criteria of the Human Development Index and an understanding of a country's capabilities, true measurement of national growth would not exist. One way the use of the Human Development Index excels over purely economic measures is through the identification of disaggregation. In a solely economic-driven index, a country's overall growth result can conceal the fact that different groups within the country have very different levels of human development. Disaggregated indices benefit measures by using the data against HDI components pertaining to each of the separate groups, treating each group as if it was a separate country. Using disaggregated indices at the national and subnational levels helps highlight the significant disparities and gaps among regions, between the sexes, between urban and rural areas, and among ethnic groups. With respect to disaggregation, the HDI's thoroughness, coupled with the accuracy assured by the utilization of data published by international organizations, has been one of the main drivers behind its success. Life expectancy at birth is provided by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, mean years of schooling by Barrow and Lee, expected years of schooling by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, and gross national income per capita by the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. While we acknowledge that not all data is accessible, we can at least know that the data given is accurate and non-biased, since the Human Development Index does not collect directly from countries themselves. In addition to the user's understanding of the data, the Human Development website offers a build-your-own development index, which allows users to construct an alternative index using 9 potential dimensions, including inequality, poverty, gender, sustainability, human security, and empowerment. Unlike traditional restrictive economic measures, the data for the Human Development Index is precise, diverse, and substantially relevant to all areas of growth. All factors considered, the Human Development Index is the only true measure of a country's growth. It offers a variety of standards which a country's population is measured against to determine overall development on a multi-analytical scale, not solely on economic standings. By limiting your data from the start of the index process and therefore not taking into account the many other variables in which society itself measures development, one cannot rightfully justify any conclusion drawn. The Human Development Index allows for the inclusion of standards met outside of monetary value of a country, therefore giving true identity to the overall growth of a nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And now we'll hear the 5-minute opening statement from the refuting team.
Okay. Also like to thank everybody for coming and going to taking part in our debate here. The HDI, Human Development Index, is an invalid statistic in the modern world. It presupposes a level of equality that does not and probably has never existed. Development of modern nations cannot be simply quantified. A lack of qualitative information taints any attempt to stack nations up against each other. As members of an increasingly interdependent global community, we need to look more deeply into ourselves as developed nations and our relationships with those still in the process of development. 3 major points HDI does not factor into its equation are sustainability, exploitation, and adherence to human rights. Sustainability of environmental and even financial resources has been proven to be a detriment to development. This problem is exacerbated in the developing world. It drives long-term financial instability on markets across the globe. The exploitation of resources and peoples, foreign and domestic, is not noted in the HDI formula either. One only needs to look over the Nairobi slums to see the social effects of developing nations' exploitation of those less fortunate. It should be no surprise that marginalized rebel groups attack oil pipelines. Similarly, financial exploitation has driven some nations relatively high HDI, such as Switzerland, who recently came under scrutiny once again as a tax shelter for laissez-faire business interests and as a shelter for offshore holdings of human rights abusers like Gaddafi. Native populations can be exploited as well, and nowhere does HDI account for this. Shouldn't Germany's relative progress, and even the US's, be considered in light of their million-strong non-citizen workforce? There's a reason Germany lacks a minimum wage, and it is the migrating Polish industrial worker. Furthermore, an adherence to basic human rights should also be quantified. What level of individual liberty does your nation foster at home and abroad? Does your nation condone gender inequality, homophobia, xenophobia? Are citizens free to worship whatever deity they wish without fear of discrimination? Can you even vote? The relative financial success of Australia can be attributed to a racially and financially restrictive immigration policy, keeping intact the population density of 6 people per square mile as opposed to a global average of over 105. A similar case can be made for the relative wealth of Norway. Looking over inequality-adjusted HDIs bring us closer to the mark, but still far short. Life expectancy, literacy, and income are important statistics, but are all also related to each other. The wealth of Netherlands allows their citizens the world's best pre- and postnatal care, enhancing health and life expectancy. During the Cold War, Soviet citizens had exceptional literacy rates, yet in many cases lacked health care and income. A more qualitative case needs to be made in each instance to clarify where each nation is in regards to development and development opportunity. It does not predict the future. It is a misleading snapshot of the now. Thank you.
Thank you, Christopher. Just to remind you, it's now my privilege to direct questions to each of the 2 teams. There's a 6-minute allowance for each side. I'll start with questions to the supporting team. Advances in data collection techniques and data mining tools have been remarkable, yet the quality of the data remain questionable. How do you respond to the charge that the HDI still suffers from data quality issues?
Yeah. I didn't know if we were going to have to pick. Okay, all right.
HDI measures things that we can get solid data on, like just solid numbers. HDI is all about the numbers, but really, like, numbers are more of an objective way of measuring these things. You can't really take into effect this tribal knowledge that people have that are just like prior assumptions to. You can't really measure well-being or growth based on assumptions that you might have. You know, inside of you, there has to be an objective approach to that. You really need solid data to work this. You can't really measure morals or anything like that with so many different views on morals. You can't really quantify. There's a lot of things that you cannot quantify, such as morality or religious freedom. There's a lot of ways that there just are no figures for it, and that's why the HDI concentrates on things that people hold intrinsically to themselves, like living a long, happy life, income, literacy, education. These are things that I think everybody can agree that are somewhat important to a country's development, without factoring in other things that may skew these figures.
Anyone else from the, could add anything to Nicholas's opening observations?
I would also like to add, like I said in my opening statement, that the data provided for the HDI is very accurate, such as it's collected by organizations that are not affiliated with countries. So the data is definitely not biased, unlike many other data measures that we see. So the data is provided by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, borrowingly, and the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, as well as the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. So one of the main points of the HDI is that the data is very accurate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Allow me to follow up just a little bit. When I listened to your opening statement, it occurred to me that perhaps one of the underlying assumptions is that equality is a good thing across society. Is that the same thing as development?
I would say that it doesn't. I think that equality can be measured in different nations, but the thing is, some religions in different nations just aren't okay with equality. They kind of keep the gender separate, and they have, you know, the women being covered up and the men being more dominant, but that's how their religion is, and I don't think there's any way to measure that. Like, is it right, is it wrong? You can't really measure it. That's their religion, that's the way they believe. So I think it's something that can't be measured in a way.
Okay, thank you. How are we doing on time? Okay, good. The 2011 Human Development Report argues that the urgent global challenges of sustainability and equity must be addressed together. What policies do you recommend to address these conditions?
We decided that based on, could you just repeat the last part of that question?
Sure.
So I can just
I'll repeat the whole question.
word this correctly. Yeah, that'd be great.
The 2011 Human Development Report argues that urgent global challenges, including sustainability and equity, must be addressed together. What policies do you recommend that would address this?
What we find is really important is just being able to make people aware of these things. Education, like not-for-profit organizations, could be set up to educate people, whether they're in need, or even just corporations that are in the business of making profits. Everybody needs to be educated on this thing together. It needs to be like a general knowledge. Like everybody has to have the same information about sustainability and equity. I would say that in the end, education will bring us all together. There's no equity or sustainability if you don't know how to sustain resources. Just a mass awareness, I think, is important.
Okay, Nicholas. Anyone from this team want to add to that or expound? We're about to run out of time for your allotted 6 minutes. Let me ask a very simple question, if I might. What's wrong with simple per capita GDP as a measure of development?
Well, in the world, 85% of all global assets belong to 10% of the people living in the world. 10%, which is that's 60 million people. That's quite well, 70 million. We've reached the 7 billion person mark now. And what are we to do with the rest of the 6,300,000,000 people? Because wealth is so. Oh, I can finish? Okay, sorry. Wealth is incredibly concentrated, and GDP is just not the best way to measure whether a country is developing or not. You can have countries like the United States. Yes, we have the second best GDP now. But how do you know if people are literate? You don't know if people are living long lives. That's fine. That's not GDP can't strictly measure development. It's just a number. It's just income.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll ask the refuting team to respond to questions from the moderator. Let me ask the same question to you that I just asked the supporting team. What's wrong with simple per capita GDP as a measure of development?
There's nothing wrong with it. The country, the saying that money makes the world go round is absolutely true. An economy needs money. People need money in order to survive. To rebut the 10% owns a majority of the wealth, it's also the 10% of the wealthy among us that employ 80% of the people. So, it's kind of hard to say that 10% of people enjoying the wealth is a bad thing, because it's really not, because it is ended up passing down to the ripple effect of if I have money to spend, I'll go out and spend it and create jobs. The purpose of the HDI, it doesn't matter how quality related the statistics are, it's irrelevant, because the HDI is taking information that's already known. It tells us what we so the GDP and GNP arguably, which is major factors of a country's economy, determines how, because all the aspects of the HDI, like education and literacy, all that, requires money in order for them to be successful. So their goal, money equals happiness.
Thank you, Christopher.
And I'd like to add, they're related, they're almost the same thing. Your country's going to be more literate. In many cases, your life expectancy is going to be higher if you have a high GDP. There's a strong correlation between the HDI rankings and the GDP rankings. It's not exact, but when you look at, inequality-based or gender inequality-based HDIs, they're a little closer, but they're still lacking, base information of where does your income come from, and has it been obtained in an unethical way that's been detrimental to the GDP of another nation or the HDI of another nation.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to add two quick comments.
Yes.
Does it really affect your life if you know that someone in Norway is happier than you are? I mean, it shouldn't. That's the purpose of the debate here, is to find out if HDI is a great way of measuring a country's happiness. What should only matter is how an individual's life, and that's the way, and I was reading actually this morning that America has taken the HDI and revamped it to do an internal, their own American-based HDI report. And what they did was they changed aspects of it to look at how the individual's life is affected by GDP and income and education. So I think in comparison, it shouldn't really matter what country. I guess it's great to know if you want to go into a third world country and develop it, but it really shouldn't matter how much happier someone else is than you are.
Let me boil this down just a bit for this team. You've argued that perhaps a single measure like per capita GDP is an acceptable measure. What about a really simple measure like happiness? what's wrong with happiness as a simple measure and singular point measure of development?
Yeah, we believe that the index that they use for happiness in the HDI is more skewed towards a Western mindset. It doesn't take into account individual cultural norms. And like, for example, we heard that a certain country is 150 times happier than Ethiopia. Okay, does that mean, like, does their score mean those people are really 150 times happier? I feel like what it takes to be happy depends on where you live. Some people would be happy, just to have, food and water and a roof over their head. And other people would become jaded at the point when their country gets more developed, where they would need, have Wi-Fi, internet, and air conditioning. It's all relative, and the index of happiness needs to be take into account individual cultural attitudes.
Anything else to add?
Because happiness is a feeling, it's really something that, it's a personal perspective of what you think happiness is. So the only way that someone can actually go around and definitely say if a country is, quote, happy, is if they went to every single citizen and asked you, based on your perception of happiness, are you happy? And I've never gotten a survey asking me if I was happy, so there's no statistic out there to really measure happiness.
Okay. I posed the question to the affirmative team concerning the sort of assumption of equality. Is equality a desirable goal?
I mean, absolutely not. I mean, at least in the realm of international business, when you look at like companies, like for instance, Coke Industries doing off the books business all over the world, and has been repeatedly fined in France and in various nations for doing business in places like Iran and mineral exports in Central Africa, where whole communities have been poisoned by corporate interest. So that has driven our HDI, our literacy, our life expectancy higher, and has detrimentally affected the developing or underdeveloped nations that some of our multinationals have done business with in exacerbated numbers. It's devastated regions, whereas it's helped us a little.
Okay. Anything else to add? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
I guess that's all right.
Okay, I think we ran out of time. Thank you very much. The next portion of our debate will have each of the teams posing questions to the other team. And we'll start with the supporting team on my right, your left, posing questions to the refuting team, again with a 6-minute time frame. Ladies and gentlemen.
All right, so here's a question. Countries such as Greece and Italy are suddenly failing economically and may not be currently perceived as developed based on economic measures such as GDP per capita, or GDP for that matter. So without HDI, how then do you measure our country's development?
Well, obviously, Greece and Italy are both developed countries. The GDP absolutely has to do with the failing of their economies. What it comes down to is the failing of the euro, and that's a completely different type of economy debate, and one that really isn't even close to being measured by an HDI, because it has to do with the euro and not happiness. That's why their economies are failing.
I think something that we need to focus on during this debate, the question of the debate is, does the Human Development Index, is that a good way to measure a nation's development rather than happiness?
I thought the debate was about happiness. It was how the HDI measures a country's happiness.
Is development happiness though?
Absolutely.
I don't think necessarily it is. I mean, it doesn't really have to do with how a country's going along with happiness. They're kind of two different things, if you think
But
about
the
it.
development...
So if HDI is a snapshot of where a nation's at now, how different is that snapshot going to look in Italy and Greece and Iceland next year, where, banking systems have ravaged their economies. Their income is going to drop. Their literacy, 5 to 10 years from now, should drop. and their life expectancy will most certainly drop because less people have access to resources and healthcare and schooling. I mean, it's basic economics. When you lose that much money off the top, it doesn't go anywhere. It disappears.
So all these things that you described are the three factors in which HDI is calculated, and you think those are important.
They're important,
And,
Yeah, and there's
but that's
only
how you
one-
measure
there's
it,
only
and that's how
one
you're
factor.
measuring.
but they're not predictive.
We're not saying that they're predictive. If without the HDI, if you can measure a country's development, the HDI contains aggregated results. Like if you want to go on the website and you want to calculate an HDI, you can also, there's also several indexes included in HDI, such as like the GDI, which is the gender inequality. You can put that in there if you want, and you can calculate a new figure. You can calculate the GEM, which is gender inequality as far as economic and political stance goes. You can factor that into the HDI if you think a country is failing because of this reason. There's a human poverty index, which is HPI, which is another option that you can implement into the HDI. There's over 15 indexes that the HDI can consider, considering economic states. And these are all aggregated to account for cultural norms too. Like China, this part of China is incredibly well industrialized. Well, a whole lot of it is just not there, and you can account for this underneath the HDI if you want to factor that in. That can be all factored in. You said that equality isn't necessarily something you should strive for, but how can you say that when you are preaching about sustainability, exploitation, and human rights, which I believe are all equality issues?
I don't think that you just said.
I'm sorry, I was trying to get to
I think that's a question.
Yeah.
I'll give you a chance to respond.
No,
Thank you.
Sorry.
development actually absolutely involves the economy and money and quality. That's how a country's economy is measured, is how well they do, and that's the definition of quality. So, I mean, to talk about your China example, just because one part of the country is not doing well, that's part of the overall statistics of one's economy. It doesn't matter if one area is not doing well and one's doing well, it's all averaged in together, and that's the result of their development and quality.
I mean, here's how we look at it. This is a bad judgment because it lacks qualitative data. It's just quantity. It's just numbers. And human society is far too complex to just quantify. Human development is far too complex to just quantify. How many nations of the world that are considered undeveloped or developing have, majority of their economy going on through a black market, commerce, local markets, things like that aren't able, there's no way that you could compile that economic data for income. And then of course there's going to be, a base inequality when you look at anything that's going to rate three things that are all related: literacy, life expectancy, and income. There's a strong correlation between all three of those things, so you're basically looking at the same thing 3 times.
And even if you could do that, three major scores that determine the HDI are capped on a 0 to 1 ratio, which means that once you hit the ceiling of 1, you can't go any higher no matter how, even though there's still great potential to continue to develop.
We have just a few seconds, I think, left on this round. Do you have a follow-on or a question you'd like to pose?
So how would you guys propose to measure a nation's development? How would you guys think that you could measure moral standards and everything that you say should be included? How would you measure it
Really,
without data?
The GDP and GNP.
Aren't those numbers though?
Absolutely, but everything else, like inequality and so forth, is unmeasurable. How can you measure someone's gender or race inequality?
Thank you, Tyler. That will be the last word for this section. Now the table will return, and the refuting team has the opportunity to ask questions of the supporting team for 6 minutes.
My first question, there's countries that aren't taken into consideration for the HDI index. Why would an organization such as the UN, that's founded on aspirations of world peace and world equality, deny countries to be included in the HDI equation?
The UN is is an organization that prides itself on trying to bring all of the countries together under world peace and everything else that you say. The UN ultimately cannot help, though, if countries are not willing to provide any kind of data. Countries such as North Korea, Monaco, Tuvalu, right now there are 12 or 13 countries that there's no HDI for. There's none. But that is because that they cannot collect accurate data. They're not providing accurate data. The UN cannot generate, they cannot generate numbers just out of thin air for these countries. The HDI includes all countries that are willing to submit data for its measurement.
And that backs up our idea that the data in the HDI is accurate because it's leaving and excluding data that is inaccurate. That way it makes the data very solid in the HDI.
Is there a follow-up?
I have go ahead, question.
Please.
How do you respond to the fact that the HDI does not take into account the environmental factors and environmental quality of these nations? You could make the claim that pollution and environmental degradation has a direct influence on both economic development, happiness, and health.
Well, one of the things that I'd like to say about the HDI is that it's constantly improving. Just last year, it improved, and something that they really strive for in their organization is to update. So I definitely see that as something in the near future for the measurement of the HDI. However, I don't think it's necessarily a factor that should determine development of a nation and like the education and life expectancy and schooling.
There's a lot of countries that have been previously ravaged by just different kinds of governments. There are a lot of countries in Europe, the Baltic states, Asian states that have once had these totalitarian states or socialistic states that are slowly, maybe not so much becoming democratic, but becoming more free and have more standards on environmental protection. These countries were developed under a standard of just demolish everything, consume everything, and I think they're trying to get better at that. Including too many factors that are not intrinsically, bringing it down to human level. People want to live a long and happy life. People want to make money. People want to be educated. These are things that, if you ask a person, they'll say that these are probably good things. I don't think, and that spreads across the board. I think that hopefully someday, and I think that the people that commiserate the HDI are working on factors and figures to be able to measure that, but that's something that's very difficult to measure, like the effects of pollution, the effects of resource
You would need
consumption.
like a long time span to measure those things. So they might be measuring them now. They might just put that in there in the future because it's going to take a while to see how the pollution is affecting their atmosphere. So it just is going to take time.
These are sciences that are still being developed. These sciences haven't been around for too long.
And just
Thank you.
a,
Your follow-up?
just a question quick on your assertion that the HDI is accurate. If you leave certain points out of a statistical equation and then later add them, it does change the rankings of countries. So how can you say it's accurate if it doesn't include everybody?
You can't. I'm sorry, did you
Did you get the question?
Okay.
Did you get the question?
Yeah, I got the question. If you involve, and this is with any statistic, this is with any measure of any kind of statistic, if you involve too many factors, you're going to absolutely skew your results. Poland, people in general are well educated, make a decent living wage, live very long in Poland, the life expectancy is very high. But if you start considering maybe political freedoms, Poland is still much a very socialistic state. And that might not be seen as good to some countries, it might be seen as good to others. If you factor that in, people, if the HDI is measured on the fact that socialism is bad, that's going to make Poland not look good on the HDI.
I
You can't.
contend that Poland is not socialistic in any way, shape, or form.
And I would say that
There's no conceivable way in which Poland is considered
You
a
cannot-
socialist nation. They've fallen right in with freedom and democracy, and they call themselves the 51st state.
You cannot own your own house in Poland?
You can own your own house in Poland.
I don't believe that you can.
It's not true.
Okay.
It's not true.
We'll talk after. We'll talk after.
This sounds like something for another debate.
Sorry.
We're down to just a few seconds. Do you have any additional questions for the supporting team?
I mean, I would say that Poland has a minimum wage, and they would be in some ways, I guess, more socialistic towards labor than their neighbors, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that their labor is migrating to places like Germany.
Is there a question in there?
Well, he said stop, so I could ask a question.
You turn it into a question.
Well, how do you, should laissez-faire states, should states that have their HDI reduced based on, based on the misery they've sown, like Switzerland and UBS, and cleaning up like messes like Gaddafi's finances, and Australia's White Australia policy that went on until 1973 did not allow Caucasian immigration, non-Caucasian immigration. Very restrictive, kept it. Like, should they lose points on their HDI based on their...
Okay, we'll have to call that the last question, and we'll give you 30 seconds to respond.
Well, I will not repeat that these are issues that are incredibly disheartening, as well as, they should definitely play a role in whether a country should be, depending on the ranking. Like, countries are ranked. We rank countries. Some people think that's ridiculous, but it's a decent measure to be able to, especially when the statistics are very general, to be able to measure countries. However, I don't believe that these things are very important and powerful, but as far as how their development is concerned, and as far as how this might affect generally, these are just these are isolated incidents. These are things that have not happened over hundreds of thousands of years.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll have to call that the end of this session. I'm going to take moderator's privilege. The script calls for the supporting team to give their closing statement first, but I'm going to vary that since they gave their position statement first. And I'm going to call on the refuting team to give your 2-minute closing statement at this time.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Dean Petree for moderating for us today, and I'd like to thank Dr. Zlakowski and Dr. Kachiga for providing us with the opportunity to have this debate. And I'd like to thank the supporting team for putting up such a good fight. You guys had a lot of good points. In short, our argument is simple. The Human Development Index had a good run, but was full of flaws from the very beginning. In our increasingly connected and multipolar world, the actions of one nation can greatly affect others, and we need a new system that allows us to gather and make new decisions. The HDI does not take enough to address more nuanced issues. It fails to provide data that can be used to plan for the future. We need a new system that takes development, wealth, and prosperity, as well as the effectiveness of government programs, exploitation within and between nations, and sustainable economic practices into account. We need a system that rates happiness in a way that takes into account the cultures of the world, not just the values of the West. We need a new rating system for the 21st century and beyond.
Thank you. Now we'd like to turn to the supporting team for your closing statement.
All right, well, I'm going to give the closing statement. I would love to thank Dr. Zlakowski and Jean Kachiga for putting time and effort and collaborating on this event and generating such thought-provoking and controversial questions. Clearly there's some heat here. It's good. Thanks so much to Dr. Daniel Petree. Is that how you pronounce it?
It's Petree.
Petree?
Petree.
I was told so many different things.
So was I.
He's our founding dean in the School of Business. We're all really excited to see what he has to offer Brockport. Another thank you to Erica Cooper for your introduction, and the rest of the International Business Club for supporting and sponsoring this debate. And everyone else who made an effort to attend this event, thanks. Appreciate it. Great insight has been sparked this afternoon. This is a very often controversial debate. We're considering the controversial credentials of the Human Development Index as an intelligible, reliable, and relevant measure of a country's development. Right now, as it stands, the fact of the matter is the HDI is the best single way to measure this. It's conceptually clear, it facilitates its power as a tool of communication, uses universal criteria, includes very reasonable levels of aggregation to account for countries that may have radically diverse population groups. or different social issues. GDP per capita is just basically a concentration of wealth that cannot solely measure a country's actual development. HDI breaks down these different income groups into intelligible figures. HDI's strength lies in its clarity to its user, and it holds very intrinsic values of people that, people want to live long, happy lives, people like to be educated, and, income is definitely, and it's related to the GDP. It's definitely a good way to measure a country's development, and until something else is dreamed up, we have the HDI, and that is certainly the best way to measure a country's development.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think the time has come for you to get your clickers out. Before we do that, lest the result of the vote be skewed, I think we should thank both teams, not just those who presented, but those who were members of the team but weren't part of the panel, for their obvious time, thoughtfulness, and insight. And thank yourselves for joining us today. Thank you very much. Okay, now, so the way the format is structured is Dr. Z has recorded the sort of a priori vote, sort of what you thought when you came into the room, which side you thought would prevail, or which side you had the strongest affinity for. So we're going to do this over again. We're going to vote again, right? Would you tell us when it's time to vote, and will you manage this process for us?
Yes, sir. So once again, we're going to vote on the question, the Human Development Index is a good way to measure a nation's development. And if you agree with that statement, please press A. And if you disagree, please press B. If you think the refuting team won, press B. And the supporting team, press A, please. And we are voting.
Professor, is there any third possibility? Like abstention or undecided?
It's A.
If you are, that's a great point. If you're undecided or you want to pick other, then pick C. Yes, sir.
Are you supposed to be like a green?
Yeah.
Yeah, it should
off,
blink.
on switch is at the bottom. Okay. Well, I've got plenty of clickers.
Yeah, the flavor.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks. When I just want to briefly say that when you think about these students have multiple classes that they're taking, 5 or 6 classes, in some cases 2 or even 3 jobs, a family with children at home, that your performance is really remarkable. And I'm really so proud to be associated with you. So thank you so much. If you could give them another round of applause. Really over the top. So thanks. And thanks to you, Dean. I really appreciate it. So, is everyone done voting? Okay. Wow. This is actually really, really cool because, let me just write it down. Oh, it's changing as I go. So, we originally took the first vote, and the score was 41% to 59%. And now on the second vote, the scores have changed, and you have won 54% to 46%. So congratulations to you. Which I think was an uphill battle, actually, because it's kind of hard to, a movie critic, because Hulk Hogan's a movie author, doesn't make movies. So, as a small token of our appreciation, Erica and I have a little plug for Girl Scout cookies, which my daughter is selling, but...
So you have to buy them?
And
Give me this opportunity
we
to buy them.
have... No, I don't want you to buy them. I have Thin Mints, lemon, and these Samoas. So what would you like?
Haven't had those in so long.